Julie Andrews, is it a soundstage? Is this real?
Are you kidding? That's the real thing.
This is the real deal?
Yes, and we were out there for ages because the weather was not kind to us.
The Sound of Music may look effortless, but even this timeless classic has moments that quietly break the illusion. From a car roof that changes color between scenes to cast members missing their cues and actors who seem to grow taller as the story unfolds.
This thing came at me sideways, sort of like this giant sort of crab coming at me, or a grasshopper or something.
These hidden bloopers and behind-the-scenes slips reveal that even the most magical films have their flaws. The helicopter shot nightmare. Julie Andrews was spinning on that Austrian mountaintop when the helicopter swooped down for the 7th time, and once again, she found herself face first in the dirt, spitting out grass and wondering if this iconic shot was worth the bruises. The opening sequence of The Sound of Music looks like pure magic. Andrews twirling effortlessly against those endless green hills. But getting that shot required military precision, a cameraman strapped to the outside of a helicopter, and a pilot who kept forgetting his aircraft was basically a flying hurricane. The downdraft from the chopper was so powerful that it knocked Andrews flat every single time it passed. 6 attempts ended with her sprawled on the ground, her dress covered in mud, while the crew reset for another try. She couldn't hear any of her musical cues over the rotor noise, which meant choreographer Mark Bro had to hide in nearby bushes with a megaphone screaming, "Now! Spin now!" at the top of his lungs. The multiple takes stretched across so many hours that nature itself refused to cooperate. The final shot used in the movie gives away the struggle. When the helicopter camera zooms in on Maria, the sky is bright and sunny, but when it cuts to the ground camera, clouds have rolled in. Making matters worse, the farmer who owned this picturesque field had already cut all the tall grass the production team specifically asked him to preserve. They arrived to find stubby grass instead of the flowing meadow they'd envisioned. Scrambling to salvage the location, they built an artificial stream and literally trucked in trees to create the pastoral scene audiences would fall in love with. Meanwhile, the farmer grew increasingly furious as helicopters terrorized his cattle and film crews trampled what remained of his property. Bleach, baldness, and continuity errors. The Sound of Music needed its stars to look a certain way. Golden-haired and sun-kissed, the picture of alpine perfection. What the studio didn't anticipate was that achieving that look would permanently damage hair and leave at least one actor scarred by Hollywood's beauty standards. The hair and makeup department was dealing with disaster after disaster. Julie Andrews arrived for her first color test only to have the bleaching process turn her naturally brown hair a shocking shade of orange, something between a traffic cone and a rotting pumpkin. The studio executives took one look and ordered an emergency fix. The second attempt went full blonde, which looked perfect on camera, but damaged Andrews' hair so badly she needed special treatments for months afterward. Daniel Trujillo, playing Rolf, suffered even worse. The bleaching process didn't just change his hair color, it destroyed his follicles permanently. Within weeks of filming, clumps were falling out. By the time the movie premiered, he'd lost nearly half his hair. For the rest of his life, he'd joke bitterly that playing a Nazi sympathizer cost him his hairline, though the real villain was industrial-strength peroxide masquerading as hair bleach. The chaotic bleaching schedule left its mark on the film itself. In the My Favorite Things sequence, Nicholas Hammond's hair as Friedrich is noticeably darker than when Maria meets the children earlier that same day. That's because My Favorite Things was actually the first scene shot for the entire film, filmed before the makeup department had finished bleaching his hair. The incredible shrinking and growing children. Nicholas Hammond started filming as Friedrich at 5'3" and finished at 5'9", creating a continuity nightmare that required increasingly creative camera angles and a lot of wooden boxes. 6 inches of growth in 6 months turned simple scenes into logistical puzzles. Friedrich needed to stay shorter than Liesel, but taller than Louisa, and Hammond's sudden growth spurt threatened that entire hierarchy. The costume department scrambled to hide the changes while cinematographer Ted McCord adjusted his framing with each passing week. Early in production, Hammond wore lifts in his shoes to appear taller. By the final scenes, those lifts were gone. He was filming in flat shoes or barefoot, and Charmian Carr had to stand on boxes just to maintain the illusion that Liesl was still the tallest child. Meanwhile, 7-year-old Debbie Turner was dealing with her own body betrayal. Her 2 front teeth fell out naturally midway through production. The props department crafted removable false teeth that she wore for continuity, though they had an unfortunate tendency to shift during singing scenes. Watch my favorite things closely, and you can spot the moment where her fake teeth slide slightly, giving her an oddly adult grimace. The costume department fought a constant battle against these changes. They had multiple versions of each outfit in different sizes, trying to predict growth spurts. Kim Karath was actually losing weight as filming progressed, requiring padding in her later costumes to match her earlier, chubbier appearance. The captain's color-changing car. Captain Von Trapp's Mercedes convertible mysteriously switches between a black and white top throughout the film, as if the car itself couldn't decide whether it wanted to be formal or festive. When the children drive the car to greet their father and new stepmother returning from their honeymoon, the convertible sports a sleek black top that matches the car's black body. But a few scenes later, when the family attempts their desperate escape from the Nazis, pushing the supposedly broken-down vehicle away from the house, that same car suddenly has a pristine white top. The transformation happens without explanation, as if the car got a new roof between scenes. The truth behind this automotive mystery was far more practical than magical. Fox actually used 2 different cars during production, one in Austria for location shots and another on the Hollywood lot for close-ups and studio work. The Austrian car came with a black top, while the Los Angeles vehicle had a white one. The continuity supervisor had actually noted the discrepancy in her reports, but fixing it would have meant reshooting multiple scenes. With the budget already stretched and weather delays mounting, Robert Wise decided the switching convertible top was a mistake they could live with. The weather that almost destroyed the film. The crew sat under tarps on a mountain for 6 straight hours, watching rain pour down, knowing every minute of delay was costing Fox thousands of dollars they didn't have. Those golden alpine meadows you see on screen? They existed for maybe 20 minutes at a time between storms. The production encountered the wettest Austrian summer in 30 years. Director Robert Wise later calculated they lost 40% of their shooting days to rain. The famous Do-Re-Mi sequence took 3 weeks to film because they could only grab 10 minutes of sunshine here, 15 minutes there. Liesl's window entrance after meeting Rolf became a marathon of misery. The scene needed her to look freshly rain-soaked, but actual rain kept stopping and starting, creating continuity nightmares. They brought in Mr. Rainstorm, a giant cold water spraying machine to keep Charmian Carr drenched between takes. 15 attempts later, shivering and miserable, they finally got their 2 minutes of usable footage. Carr developed a cold that lasted the rest of the production. The weather got so bad that roads to mountain locations became impassable mud pits. They had to transport Julie Andrews up the mountain in an ox-drawn cart because vehicles couldn't make it. She sat there in full costume and a fur coat, bouncing over rocks, trying to preserve her voice for the singing she'd do once they reached the summit. Then they'd wait hours for a break in the clouds, sometimes getting nothing, sometimes getting that magical 2-minute window that made movie history. The day Salzburg almost shut down production. The first Nazi banner went up in Salzburg's historic square at 6 a.m., and by 6:15 the police were already on their way, responding to furious calls from locals who thought the occupation had returned. Robert Wise needed these shots to show the 1938 German annexation of Austria. But Salzburg's officials absolutely refused to allow their city to be decorated with swastikas, even for a film. The wounds from World War II were still raw in 1964. Many residents had lived through the actual occupation. The mayor arrived on set personally. his face red with rage, declaring that not one Nazi symbol would hang in his city for even 1 minute. The production faced disaster until second unit director Maurice Zuberano played his ace. He pulled out actual newsreel footage from Hitler's real 1938 entrance into Austria, showing the exact streets they were standing on, covered in Nazi banners with crowds giving Hitler salutes. His threat was simple: either let us film our version where Austrians look reluctant, or we'll use this historical footage showing enthusiastic support. The mayor went pale. After emergency meetings, the city agreed to a compromise. Exactly 2 hours of filming, banners to be removed immediately, and absolutely no crowds shown cheering. Every banner had a city official assigned to watch it, ready to tear it down the second filming stopped. Those 2 hours became controlled chaos. Extras were rushed through costume, cameras rolled continuously, and there were 0 retakes allowed. The rushed nature explains why these scenes feel different from the rest of the film. Darker, more documentary-like. Because they essentially were documentary footage, cobbled together from 2 frantic hours of filming under police supervision. The fake house that fooled millions. Thousands of cinephiles arrive in Salzburg every year searching for the Von Trapp family home, only to discover they've been chasing a Hollywood illusion constructed from 2 completely different buildings located miles apart. The mansion you see in the film doesn't exist as a single property. Fox's location scouts needed something that looked wealthy enough for a naval captain but accessible enough for filming, and no Austrian building fit their requirements. So they created movie magic by using the Frohnberg Palace for the back facade, where Maria arrives and the children play in the trees, and the Leopoldskron Palace for the lake scenes and terrace shots. These 2 buildings sit on opposite sides of Salzburg, but clever editing makes them appear as one seamless estate. The interior scenes weren't even filmed in Austria. Every bedroom, the ballroom, that massive staircase where the children say goodnight, all of them were sets built on Fox's sound stages in Los Angeles. The production designers studied Austrian architecture for months, recreating carved wooden banisters and painted ceiling details that looked more authentic than many actual Austrian homes. Watch closely and the deception becomes obvious. The front exterior shows windows on every level, but when Maria walks through the front door, there are no windows in the 2-story foyer, just a giant staircase and a plain wall. The famous gazebo suffered its own identity crisis. The original structure at Leopoldskron was too cramped for filming, so the crew built a larger Hollywood replica where Liesl and Rolf could actually dance without smashing into walls. That same soundstage hosted the Captain and Maria's romantic gazebo scene. Meanwhile, the real Austrian gazebo had to be relocated to Hellbrunn Palace after persistent trespassers kept injuring themselves attempting to recreate the dance number. The 5-year-old who almost drowned on camera. The boat was supposed to tip gently, but when Kim Carruth hit the water, Julie Andrews realized with horror that she'd fallen the wrong direction and the smallest Von Trapp child was going under. 5-year-old Carruth, playing Gretel, had one major problem nobody properly addressed before filming the lake scene. She couldn't swim. The plan was simple. Andrews would fall forward toward the child and catch her immediately. But when the boat actually tipped, the weight distribution was off. Andrews tumbled backward, away from Carruth, who immediately began struggling in the murky lake water. For several terrifying seconds, Carruth's head disappeared beneath the surface. The safety divers stationed nearby froze, not sure if this was part of the scene. It was Heather Menzies, playing Louisa, who reacted first, grabbing the little girl and hauling her toward shore. You can actually see this rescue in the final film. It looked natural enough that Wise decided to keep it rather than risk another take with a now terrified 5-year-old. The lake itself was freezing, around 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and the children's costumes became waterlogged immediately, weighing them down like anchors. After Carruth's close call, the production brought in additional safety crew and heated tents for the children to recover between takes. Real Maria and movie magic. Maria von Trapp stood in her costume watching Julie Andrews walk the same path for the fourth time and loudly asked why they couldn't just use the first take since she did it perfectly fine. Director Robert Wise had thought it would be charming to include the real Maria in the film, a little Easter egg for eagle-eyed viewers. They dressed her in a period-appropriate outfit and positioned her as an extra walking through the background during I Have Confidence. Maria, who'd never been on a movie set, became increasingly frustrated with the repetitive nature of filmmaking. After 3 hours of standing in the same spot watching Andrews repeat the same movements over and over, Maria's patience snapped. She began complaining loudly in German, which wouldn't have been a problem except that several crew members understood her increasingly colorful commentary about Hollywood nonsense and wasting everyone's time. At one point, she tried to leave mid-shot, nearly ruining a perfect take. Financially, at least, things improved for Maria. She'd initially sold her life story for $9,000, but the film's massive success eventually earned her $500,000 in royalties. She and Andrews reunited in 1973 on The Julie Andrews Hour, where Maria taught the actress how to yodel properly, something the film had glossed over. The sound of mucus. The two leads arrived on set sharing one conviction. They were about to star in a disaster. Julie Andrews finished the script, looked at her husband, and predicted it would either be brilliant or the most saccharine piece of garbage ever filmed. She wasn't betting on brilliant. When she finally met director Robert Wise, she skipped pleasantries and asked the only question that mattered. How are you planning to get all the sugar out of this thing? A singing governess who melts a stern widower's heart while his angelic children learn to love music again? The whole premise felt like a recipe for cinematic diabetes. Wise was ready for her. He pulled out his production notebook, filled with strategies for grounding every treacly moment in reality. The Von Trapp children wouldn't be well-behaved cherubs, but actual kids who fought, sulked, and tested boundaries. The captain's emotional awakening would be messy and reluctant, not a sudden transformation triggered by one heartfelt song. Most importantly, the Nazi occupation would cast a shadow over everything, providing the darkness necessary to balance the light. Andrews studied his approach and reluctantly agreed to take the role. Christopher Plummer required no persuasion that the material was garbage. The classically trained Shakespearean actor viewed Captain Von Trapp as an empty carcass of a role in a story so awful and sentimental and gooey, it required Herculean effort to inject any dignity. Then came the final insult. After weeks of vocal training, producers informed him they'd be partially dubbing his voice with singer Bill Lee. Plummer was livid. His disdain for the project ran so deep that he later admitted his favorite part of the entire production was the time spent off-set, away from the cameras. For years afterward, he referred to the film as the sound of mucus, only softening decades later when he grudgingly admitted it had somehow endured. The giggling kiss that took all night. Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer were supposed to share a tender romantic moment in the gazebo, but every time they leaned in for the kiss, that ridiculous groaning sound would start and they'd collapse into uncontrollable laughter. The arc lights needed for the moonlight effect were massive, 1960s equipment that emitted a sound somewhere between a dying cow and a whoopee cushion. The first take was going perfectly. The chemistry was there and the positioning was right. But suddenly Andrews screamed. Plummer bit his lip so hard it bled. Cut. Take two. Same thing but worse, because now they were anticipating it. By take 5, the entire crew was laughing. By take 8, Robert Wise was ready to fire everyone. The more frustrated Wise got, the funnier it became to the exhausted actors. Plummer later admitted that Andrews' attempts to stay serious, her face turning red, tears forming from suppressed laughter, made him laugh even harder. They tried everything: cotton in their ears, humming to block the sound, even mild sedatives from the medical team. Nothing worked. Finally, Wise gave up and filmed the scene practically in darkness to minimize the light's use. The kiss you see on screen is actually assembled from 12 different takes. edited together to create one seemingly perfect moment. The actors were never able to complete a full kiss without laughing. The children who couldn't stop singing. Little Debbie Turner's mouth keeps moving after the music stops in My Favorite Things, and once you notice it, you can never unsee this charming mistake that reveals how caught up the children got in their performances. 7-year-old Turner, playing Marta, was so focused on remembering her lyrics that she kept mouthing "feel so bad," even when she wasn't supposed to be singing. The editors tried to cut around it, but her position in the frame made it impossible to remove. Similarly, Nicholas Hammond's Kurt continues singing after Do Re Mi ends, his mouth hanging open for a full 2 seconds of silence before he realizes the music has stopped. These weren't isolated incidents. Throughout filming, the children would get so absorbed in the musical numbers that they'd continue the choreography after cut was called. During So Long Farewell, Angela Cartwright actually completed an entire extra verse by herself before noticing everyone else had stopped. The crew found it endearing rather than frustrating. These kids weren't professional singers, but real children caught up in the magic of making music. Wise decided to leave these small mistakes in, feeling they added authenticity to scenes that could have felt over-rehearsed. The unexpected note. Julie Andrews decided to show off at the end of Do Re Mi, hitting a high note so powerful that the sound engineer ripped off his headphones, convinced the equipment was malfunctioning. The note wasn't in Rodgers and Hammerstein's original score. It wasn't in the Broadway version. It wasn't even discussed during rehearsals. But after multiple takes of the complex bicycle riding sequence, Andrews was frustrated and decided to add her own flourish. An octave jump that took her to a high B-flat that seemed to hang in the Austrian air like crystal. The 1960s recording equipment wasn't designed for that frequency at that volume. The first recording was actually distorted, creating an electronic shriek that sounded like feedback. They had to recalibrate everything and position Andrews farther from the microphones. Even then, the playback revealed something bizarre. Her voice had caused sympathetic vibrations in nearby objects. The sound team spent weeks in post-production removing subtle ringing from glasses and metal fixtures that had resonated with her voice. That improvised note became one of the film's most iconic moments, replicated by countless singers who rarely match Andrews's pure clarity. The cruel irony came in 1997 when a routine vocal cord surgery went catastrophically wrong. The surgeon accidentally damaged her vocal cords, robbing Andrews of her upper register forever. She sued for medical malpractice and won an undisclosed settlement. But no amount of money could restore the voice that once made sound equipment malfunction. The movie that saved a dying studio. 20th Century Fox executives were drafting bankruptcy papers when the Sound of Music's box office numbers started rolling in, and suddenly they realized this singing nun had just rescued their entire company. The studio was bleeding money from Cleopatra's catastrophic budget overrun. What started as a $2 million production had ballooned to $44 million, nearly destroying Fox entirely. Board members were preparing to sell off the studio lot piece by piece when The Sound of Music opened in March 1965. Within 4 weeks, it rocketed to #1 at the box office, but that was just the beginning. By November 1966, it had done the impossible, dethroning Gone with the Wind, which had held the crown for 24 years straight. The numbers were staggering even by today's standards. The film sold 283 million tickets worldwide and pulled in $286 million, equivalent to over $2 billion in today's money. Some theaters kept it running continuously for 4.5 years. The Rivoli Theater in New York City showed it for 93 straight weeks. Families would return monthly, treating it like a religious experience. Kids memorized every song. Parents found comfort in its wholesome message during the chaotic 60s, and theaters started selling song sheets so audiences could sing along. What nobody predicted was the film's international dominance. It broke attendance records in 29 countries, from Japan to Argentina. The soundtrack album went platinum 8 times over, spending 70 weeks at #1. Fox went from near death to having enough cash to fund the next decade of productions. One musical about a governess and 7 children had single-handedly resurrected a Hollywood giant. That's all for Sound of Music. Don't miss the videos on screen now. They're just as interesting. Catch you in the next one.